A number of intentions. Well, first of all, when you're making the blessing, you're first and foremost acknowledging that the food, the source of the food, is coming from God. So you're experiencing an appreciation of the source of the food, but also you're elevating the sparks in the food. You're bringing back the sparks that were lost in the material world. You're elevating it to its source, so you're really coming to the recognition that everything comes from God. Everything is holy. Everything is really sparks of God. So you're beginning to transform your whole conception of food, in that you realize that it's not the material thing that you think you're eating. You're really consuming sparks of holiness, sparks of God Himself when you're eating food. So you're transforming your understanding of the physical world when you're eating. If your intention is to elevate the sparks, you're also thinking about how you're going to use that energy that is now coming into your body, so that you can then become a stronger human being, so that you can then impart to others. See, one of the very important principles of Rav Asher, which I was going to talk about, is that it's very important to receive. We shouldn't try to negate our desire to receive. That's not what holiness is about. In fact, we should build up and strengthen our desire to receive, but then transform it and use it in a way to give. Because if we have nothing to receive, if we have nothing that we receive, then what do we have to give? So ultimately, we want to receive as much as possible, but at the same time, we have to be careful that we also strengthen simultaneously the desire to give, and we transform this whole will in the desire to receive in order to impart to others, in order to improve the lives of others. So when we eat, we should also be thinking about how the food that we're eating, the energy that's coming from the food, is ultimately going to make us, put us in a better position to become givers. So that's the orientation that one could have when they're eating, so that you change the desire to receive oneself alone to the desire to give. Does that answer your question?
And Hashem, I believe, is always giving to us, but we hold back by giving and sharing what we receive out of whatever reason, fear, doubt, and it's always coming in, but we're holding it back. And it's so profound what you said tonight, is that when we release that and we share that with others, that we really make Hashem happy, that He becomes a joyous host, that He gave over something to us, and we actually did something with it.
That's right, exactly right. And that's why it says, Bayom Hahu, in the future, Yeh Hashem Echad U'Shmo Echad. God and His name, U'Shmo, refers to the vessel, refers to us. In the future, Hashem's name, Hashem and His name will be one and the same. So what's the meaning of that? What does that mean, that God and His name will be one? It means that God and us, which was initially the desire just to receive, will be transformed into pure givers, just like God, and God and His name, and meaning us, will be virtually one and the same. Yeh Hashem Echad U'Shmo Echad. Him and His name will be almost definitions of each other. And how are we going to be like God? That question, whoever asked this question, was a great question. What do we have to give to God? What we have to give to God is to become, is to recreate the scenario of the host and the guest, and to have in mind that we're giving God such pleasure by receiving, because we know how much desire, so to speak, God and happiness God gets when we receive That's why he created the world. So at that point in the future, that's what our focus is going to be. We're going to be so rooted in God's original intention of why he created the world, that he wanted to give us benefit. He wanted to bestow his beneficence to us. So all we're going to be thinking about is that we're going to want to receive, so that we're going to give God that type of pleasure. And then at that point, God and his name will be one. So that's the meaning of what we say when in Oleinu, at the end, Vayomahu Yeshem Echad Shmo Echad.
We have another 15 minutes today. You want to do one more good idea with any questions of the after?
Oh, okay. So, so I just wanted to give a little taste of how we can apply this to health and disease. And I want to start basically with what is the definition of health and the definition of disease according to the Torah. You would think, well, where does the Torah give a definition of health and disease? So I'm going to present, this is really a lecture in itself, but I just want to give a little foreshadowing. Basically, there are two ways of approaching disease throughout history, philosophically. There's the ontological belief in disease, that disease is a thing. The word ontological means that it's a thing, it's concrete. It has existence, presence. That disease is a thing that invades the body. And then there's another philosophical viewpoint of what is disease, is that disease is not a thing, but disease is a process, an abnormal process. And they're fundamentally different. So, for example, when we say that disease is a process, what goes awry is that a number of different physiological systems and processes are not functioning normally, and when these processes are not functioning normally, it leads to a state of disease. Now you might ask, well, what about infectious diseases? That looks like a thing. That looks like an ontological cause, right? It's a microbe that is a thing that invades the body. But if you look a little bit deeper, we know that many times we find that one person will get a certain disease exposed to the same microbe, that one person will get a disease and another person won't get the disease. We also know that years ago, infectious disease was a much bigger problem than it is today. So it's not just the microbe that creates the disease. We also have to look at the host. We have to look at the immune system of the host. We have to look at the psychological state of the host. We have to look at the social conditions of the host. And in fact, if you look back, and again, you can look at the statistics to this. There's a book called The Health of Nations, where by a researcher named Leonard Sagan, where he shows that many of the infectious diseases that we were plagued with in the last century actually began to decline significantly well before the vaccines were created, and many of them actually started to decline significantly even before the development of many of the antibiotics, including the tuberculosis medications. But it's interesting, it was so concealed that they happened so close in time that it kept us in the state of confusion and thinking, the real cause, the real reason why these infectious diseases declined was because of the antibiotics or the vaccinations. But the truth is that these diseases dropped significantly before the vaccinations were discovered and before the advent of the antibiotics. And he goes on to explain that what was the main reason that all these diseases really declined, these infectious diseases that seemed like a thing that invades the body, like the ontological